Hello, hello, hello. Hello, friends. Thanks for joining me today. My name's Dan, maybe you know that. And today I thought it would be kind of fun to let you know from my side of the camera, so to speak, or from my side of life, what does it feel like to be evidently a fairly gifted drawer? Now, you see in the title there, I spelled it with a dash simply because in the English language there's no way to distinguish between the word drawer, which is what you put your underwear in, drawer, and drawer. So I'm talking here about not how to be a good drawer, but how to be a good drawer. And for those of you who are not artists, perhaps, I don't know why you would watch this. Well, you might, just because I'm so stimulating and entertaining. Let's put it down to that. To those of you who are artists, I might be helping you to be a better artist, or if nothing else, at least helping explain to you what it is that you're already doing intuitively and fairly well that other people aren't doing. Okay, enough talking. Let's get to work. Here is, first of all, a drawing that I did yesterday. You can watch me do this broadcast of Daily Art Adventure number 511. There's the photograph that I was painting from. I've called this my traffic series. And here's the drawing that I did from it. Now, this is not bad. It was just a quick sketch. There are several things that are wrong, quote unquote, wrong about it. Hello, David. Always catching me being humble. Thank you. There's more coming, David. Hang on. Put your seatbelt. Put your earplugs in. In the interest of trying to be forthright and honest, sometimes I just have to speak bluntly. Okay, so today, that was fun. That was yesterday, and that was very definitely an exercise in drawing. Today, I want to do a drawing. I don't know if this fits into my traffic. I don't think so. I think this is more in the automotive category. Hello, Zamorite from California. Good to have you on board again. This is more goes along the lines of my interest in automotive painting. A very, very narrow sideline of what I don't consider myself an expert by any means, but it's fun. And since I have time today just to do what I want, I decided to do some more of that. Now, let me take a minute and explain, especially this is for you, for non-artists. And again, if there's any non-artists watching, this is for you. If there are any artists watching, then let's at least maybe I'll help elucidate for you what it is that your brain does that other brains don't do. First of all, let me demonstrate what drawing is not. Now, this is especially for those of you who may not be artists. Drawing is not, frankly, it's not what most of you think it is. Anyway, but way back in 3rd or 4th grade, oh, I should hold my pencil in the 3rd or 4th grade manner. Well, there was this little exercise. It went like B, O. I haven't done this in decades. Let me see if I can still remember it. And then you do something like this. And I'm not sure what happens up here. I'm not sure where the ear goes. There's a question mark there. But in 3rd or 4th grade, that was called drawing. Let me give you some other examples. Now, in 2nd grade, so I just went back. This is called drawing. And a tree, and a swing in the tree, and a sun in the corner, okay? These, by the way, all of these right here, I call them super simple survival oriented symbols, SSSOS. Super simple survival oriented symbols. That's a topic for another day. Every time I teach a drawing, I go into that quite at length. Let's do another back to 3rd, 4th grade. There was some kid always in every class that could say, hey, if it's a girl, want to see me draw? And she would say, what does a girl draw? Want me to see me draw? Want me to see me draw a horse? And then the girl would draw something like this. Or she'd say, want to see me draw a unicorn? I just switched from horse to unicorn, okay? And And basically what the child in 3rd or 4th grade would do, that I'm trying to demonstrate here, is that they would hammer out really quickly a bunch of premeditated, pre-planned, pre-practiced lines. I'm just making this up, by the way. I'm not prepared, pre-planned, pre-practiced, none of those. But it would be a drawing like this. The kid in the class would say, "Hey, want to see me draw a race car?" And he would draw, I don't know what. I don't know what. I'm just trying to make up. What I want you to see more than anything else. Oh, this. Okay, never mind. This is a Formula One race car. Let's pretend he's doing Formula One. And again, the point is, this is terrible, but the point is, all of the lines that this 3rd or 4th, the 3rd or 4th grade Zamorite was a horse girl. The key concept here is pre-learned, pre-practiced, pre-programmed, predictable. You get it? In 3rd or 4th grade, another kid would say, "Hey, want to see me draw a star?" And many of you, this is how you learned how to draw. To you, that's maybe the best example I've given so far. This is called drawing. Okay, this I'm talking to you non-artists. This in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, somewhere, 6th grade maybe, you learned this kind of thing. It was pre-planned, prepared, pre-practiced, predictable. Same thing like with this little boy fun puzzle. And to you, this is what drawing is. And I'm here to tell you, as an adult professional, this is most certainly not what drawing is. Now, this concept that people have about what constitutes drawing, believe it or not, does rise up occasionally and bite me in the butt as a professional artist. I had a job, I can't show it to you now, I had a job a couple months ago where a woman wanted me to do a portrait of her husband and her son. Long story, I won't go into it. She did not have a photograph. She had a whole bunch of other photographs of her husband and her son. But after she saw me do the first rough sketch, maybe something like they were hugging. It wasn't, anyway, it was a lot tighter than this. But after she saw me do the first rough sketch, father and son hugging, it was tighter than this, but you're getting the idea. After she saw my first rough sketch, she lost all confidence in my artistic ability. Why? Because in 3rd grade, she learned how to draw a unicorn or a horse or a flower or you name it. Or for your boy, you learn how to draw guns and you learn how to draw jets and you learn how to draw, you know what I mean, being really typical sexist here. If you're a boy, you learn how to draw fighter jets. I guess nowadays you learn how to draw Star Wars and all kinds of other stuff. But in many non-artists' minds, this is what drawing is. So this woman, when she saw me struggling to capture, and I was in the early stages, she fired me. Now, frankly, I was glad to be fired because I could see trouble was coming ahead of time with this woman. Thanks for the vote of confidence, David. So I was quite happy to lose this job, although I was not happy because I did, count them, four fairly tight sketches for this woman before she fired me. So I was not happy. Okay, so if that is not what drawing is, what is drawing? So out with all the pre stuff. Get it? No pre-planning, I'll say the next level. Here, I threw my paper and pencil away too quickly. Here's the next level of misconception. I'm just going to write it. I drew this out of my head. And often when the amateur artist says this, they are very proud of themselves. Here's a man with a proud smirk on his face. I drew this out of my head. Here's his hair. Got it? See, that's all pre right there. Okay, I drew this out of my head. And what did he draw? Who knows? A picture of a castle and a fair maiden in distress and a knight on a horse rescuing her, and trees and mountains and so forth. Great fun. Is this real drawing? Yes. But look at these two words. Out, I guess, of head, three words. Out of head. If stuff's coming out of your head, out of your head, out of your head, out of your head, then by definition, your head is shrinking. It was this big, now it's this big. I'm being facetious, of course. But to make the point, as long as you draw out of your head, your body of drawing skill, your drawing of body information gets smaller. The only way to make your head get bigger, so since I drew a small head, let me draw a big head. The only way to make and of course, again, I'm using analogical language, analogy. In order to make your head get bigger, in order for your brain to get smarter, what do you need to do? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. How an artist draws. Okay, now let's get to the subject at hand. Forgive me, I'm fighting a bit of a cold here today, so I'm trying to be civil in front of you. Let me drink some more of my wonderful energetic vitamin juice here. All right, so I already told you I'm going to draw this, and I started doing this on my own and then decided, wait a minute, this would be a good broadcast because this is a fairly complex, would you agree with me? A fairly complex subject matter. Okay? And I'm debating whether to, yep, I'm going to do one more. I'm going to do one more. This is not drawing, and I have to say, no, this time, this is not good drawing. This is drawing, but it's not good drawing. So here it is. I'm going to start with this headlight, and I draw this headlight. And I draw it pretty carefully, and I draw it pretty completely. See, that's that. Just a little bit of shading right now. I'll come back and do more later. And then I go from there to the stuff that's right next to the headlight. Okay. Now I'm doing this because this is not typically a good practice. This is not a good way to draw. Sometimes you can luck out and actually get a pretty good drawing this way. But what I'm trying to model here, I wonder if I can draw on this. I think I can. The kind of drawing bad drawing I'm modeling here is you start at one little point and then you work outward from there as if working up from the center of a circle. I hope I can wipe all that off. Yeah, okay. Most of it came off. That'll do. Okay? So that's a bad way to draw. Why? Because what you don't realize is that as you migrate across the image, your scale will change. Things get too small and too big. Then late in the process, you'll look at your drawing with fresh eyes and go, oh, dang, I don't have room for, this wheel. I don't have room for this. I don't have room for the roof. The scale will be completely off. So that's not a good way to draw. Okay? So there's 3 ways not to draw. Did you get it? Number one, the pre-planned, prepared, pre-practiced, predictable way of drawing. Number 2, drawing out of your head. That's okay for a while, but that can't be your stock in trade. That can't be your standard practice, or your brain shrinks. Again, I'm being funny to make the point. And number 3, you don't start in one point and move up. Okay, that's especially true when you're working on faces. Okay, so now finally, how to yes draw. There's 3 ways not to draw. The most standard way to work, so this is standard art school, art professor standard, I mean by that, is to try to see the big shapes first. Okay, so I am, again, I have a little stand right there that I can, a little easel that I can put that marker on. And Samurai asks a very good question. Would you consider cartooning real drawing? Oh my goodness, that is a great question. And I don't know if you know this or not, Samurai, but I'm a cartoonist. I spent decades. 30 years ago, I was slightly well-known across the country as a cartoonist. Isn't that funny? I mean, it's just ironic now because now nobody knows I'm a cartoonist. Could go either way. No, drawing the same cartoon figure over and over and over. Nah, that's not really drawing. So Charles Schultz doing Peanuts? No, that's not real. If I may, Bill Watterson doing Calvin and Hobbes, the same character over and over. No, that's not artwork. But ironically, Bill Watterson, to my mind, along maybe with Walt Kelly of Pogo, but anyway, Bill Watterson, the best illustrator who is a famous cartoonist. His backgrounds are spectacular. He's a very, very, very good. So there you go. It kind of can go both ways. But no, where you're drawing the same character over and over and over, not a real valid way to draw. Bill Watterson, evidently, besides drawing Calvin and Hobbes over and over and over and over again, he was looking at the world around him and studying it because it's reflected. It's very stylized, but he's a very good illustrator. So there you go. Could go either way with cartooning. That's a very good question. Okay, so I'm looking here for the major shape. And this lesson is going to be helped by this little trick that I use of starting with the lightest color first. Okay, so let me let you look at it with me. I'm going to say, hang on, I'm going to stand up here and get a ruler for a second. Oh, speaking of which, standing up. I'll take advantage. I'll take advantage of this moment where I am standing up to say everything I'm doing here is actually helped by standing up. In other words, if you stand up, you can draw better than if you sit down. Ha! Put that one in your something, in your pipe and smoke it. Put that one. Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that some of the simplest line. Can you see that all right? Yeah. Some of the simplest lines I have going here is if I reduce this thing to a triangle. That's just a thought, just a maybe. Okay, and I just used the rulers so that you could see the triangle I was looking at. Well, let me start with that. Since I mentioned a triangle, let's start with that. So, goes from here down to here. Now, most of you would not have seen that triangle, I'm guessing. Again, it's sort of from this corner to the tire. Let's see, it cuts. Let me get my rulers back out again. Cuts right across all of this stuff. I'm eliminating all that for the moment, just going from there to there, and then from this point to out here somewhere. So not much is eliminated there, but from here to that point, a whole bunch is eliminated. Okay, so that's just a way to think. Now, another option I would have would in fact be to draw that triangle on here. That would be a good trick. And if I had a dry erase marker on my hands right now, I would do that. But I don't, so I'm not going to. Did you catch that though? That would be a good trick. Now I'm going to stick with yellow for a minute because on top of this triangle, I'm going to get one more degree complex. You can see this is an L shape, right? Vertical, horizontal. So if I put this L shape on top of my triangle, this corner stays the same, and the bottom of the L the bottom of the L goes at an angle. So I won't draw that straight part out, but the top part goes down at an angle about like that. So now I've seen two major shapes. Okay, this is far enough. I call this how it feels. How does your brain feel when you're doing good drawing? And the answer is, it feels sort of like your body feels when you try to do a 200-yard dash. It's hard work. It's already, my brain is feeling a little bit, there's a lot of information here. How in the world am I going to do this? Okay, so I just want you to know, how does it feel? It feels like it's overwhelming. Feels like I'm probably going to screw up here. Right on international YouTube. Oh, there you go. David's got a good point. Hey, David is suggesting tape this paper to your drawing board and go right ahead to perspective drawing. So take like a long ruler, like in this case, and then your vanishing point might be way up here on the table. Got it? And David, you're the expert at perspective. That is a very valid way to draw. Okay. I'm going to try not to do that. Now, that's a perfectly valid way to do it. David. Thank you. I'm going to try to do it in a sense to intuit the perspective without you mechanically doing it. Not because that's not a good way. I would say when I'm out on the street painting a cityscape, a landscape, most of the time I don't have the luxury of pinning literally a physical vanishing point out here and out here, off the canvas. Now, if there's a vanishing point in the middle, I do like a 1 point looking down the street. I do put a dot of paint there in the middle, which is close to what you're talking about. Let me continue. Okay, so now I've just drawn a rectangle that is supposed to be the rate, and that's completely off. It's not accurate at all. So now I'm thinking, okay, something's wrong with this, then I better start fixing it. And Zamorite asks another question: do I consider like graphic novel, superhero, cartoon, real art? And the answer is, ironically, yes, absolutely. The cartoon people, by that I mean not funny cartoons, but the comic book superhero cartoon stuff are these days. In fact, that's part of what gives me great hope for the future of art, is the younger generation. Kolomani asks a good question. Is it the vanishing point on the paper? It looks like all the points converge at this horizon on the paper in the left corner. Good question. Good question. Let me grab my ruler. And of course, on this car, there's not very many really straight lines, so it's... Yeah, I think very close. Yeah, I think in this case, you're right. I think the vanishing point would be right about there. So maybe we will do a vanishing point later in the process and use that. Create a literal vanishing point there. I was saying, answering Zamorite's question about comic book art, and I was saying part of what gives me hope that the younger generation is going to throw off the shackles of the university art system and say, to heck with all your modern crap. We believe good drawers are really people who can draw stuff that looks like stuff. Yeah, those people are very highly skilled and very highly practiced. And I mean, literal practice. How do good comic book artists get good at drawing comics? The answer is they work the heck out of figure drawing, right? They do the hard work of learning how to draw figures. So they fill up their brain continually with practice drawing realistic figures. and then sure, they draw out of their head, but that's only because they put so much, so that their brain has gotten so huge that they can afford to draw some out of their head. But then when they're not drawing for the comic, they fill it up again by practicing figure drawing. In fact, I have a niece who's a very excellent young cartoonist, budding young cartoonist. Her Instagram is called Gray's Arts, Grays, Gray's Arts. And I don't know if she's going to work for Disney or what. She was offered a job at Disney a couple years ago. I don't know if she's taking it or not, but it's been fun to watch her develop this series. And she works very hard at perfecting the human figure, so to speak. Now, at this point, I have to make a decision. The way I started with my triangle and my L shape and so on, my image is clearly going off the page. And so I have to either go, oh, darn, and start over or erase this or something, or say, oh no, I actually like it. And the answer is the second. I've actually sketched this, not completely, but I started a sketch of this car earlier. And it also went off the page. I actually like it. I don't need, anyway, I think that's sort of an artistic decision and a screw up mistake, both, you understand? But in my mind, it's a screw up I can live with. It's a little bit more artsy. So, but if you want your painting to contain the whole, of course you can pull this tape off and get another inch in each direction. That is a valid option. Okay, so I'm about, at what percent? How close am I to capturing? I'm ready to be done with yellow. I'm ready to go on to the next darker color. So again, if you haven't watched me do this, then let me explain this trick very briefly. That these are watercolor pencils. They're not colored pencils. They're watercolor pencils. The same could be done with watercolor or ink or paint. I think it was Zamorite who mentioned yesterday. She does a similar thing in ink. Whereas I start out with very light colors and they get progressively darker. It's just a trick, if you will, for capturing a realistic image, especially if the image is fairly complex. Let me take a slight detour. If I were doing this in paint, in oil, what would I do? Oil paints are actually in my opinion, the easiest way to do this. First of all, you're typically working on a canvas, right? It's vertical, it's in front of you. And you start drawing with a brush and dark paint, and it doesn't dry. So you can wipe it, smudge it, move it, and then you can come back a minute later and do it again and do it again. So when I do, my favorite way to do portraits, which is the most challenging drawing of all, I very much prefer to do portraits in oils because of that easy way to change. So the way I'm doing it here in a watercolor sketch is doing progressively darker. By the way, I just switched, I don't know if you noticed, from a cross hand grip or what do I call it normally? Anyway, a grip that eliminates my fingers and I have to move my arm. I just switched from that to a control grip. Maybe prematurely. So let me stop here and again answer the question, how does it feel to be a pretty good drawer? And I'm going to zoom back in. The answer is hard. The answer is, let me pull the photograph down here. So right now I'm looking at this negative shape and I'm comparing it to mine and making adjustments. And I'm looking at another shape. Let's say the shape of this whole grill, or even just the shape of half the grill from here down. I'm looking, is my shape close to the shape of the photograph? Whoops. And I'm kind of going, No, I'm a little nervous. I don't feel like it's quite close enough. For instance, I scribbled in the front bumper right here. And look at how much distance there is from the bottom of this grill to the bumper. Like a lot. I can't say an inch because my scale might be different. I got my bumper way too close. So which one is wrong? Well, let's go find out. Let's compare it to other things. Let's draw a straight line from this part of the fender. It's just about straight across. Whoa, 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 whoa. Something's wrong here. So either this fender needs to come down a lot farther. Okay, so now you're hearing the real, how does it feel? And the answer is, darn, I screwed up. That's how it feels. That's how it feels to be a good drawer. It's like, oh, darn, I screwed up. Okay? And that's part of the point I want to make. This is such a far cry from what we learned in grade school as, the kid in class that was the best drawer was the kid or the girl that could do the horses or the boy that could do the race cars and the guns. Pre. That is not drawing. This is drawing. And how does real drawing feel? Most of the time it feels like, oh, darn, I screwed up. Okay? That's the truth. And I'm a pretty good drawer. I'm not bragging here because I hope doesn't sound like I'm bragging because I just told you I'm screwing up right here in front of you. And clearly my bumper needs to come down here quite a bit. No, something is wrong here because my wheel and fender is too big compared to my grill. So I'm going to start by enlarging my grill. And my friend David says I think he's saying he's afraid I've lost the joy of drawing or creating, the fun of creating art. Maybe. To me, this is fun. It's a strange kind of fun, I admit it. But it is a mental workout. I think everybody that's ever tried to draw or paint acknowledges it. And I think a big part of this broadcast is I want to tell, especially those who are not experienced artists, that it is a mental workout. It's not easy. Because I think a lot of non-artists, again, they remember, or here's another example, Bob Ross, right? In 26 minutes, Bob Ross does this beautiful mountain and deer and waterfall. No, Bob Ross is this kind of stuff. Pre-planned, prepared, pre-practiced, pre-everything. That is not real art. People say to me sometimes, was Bob Ross a good painter? The answer is I have no idea. I have no idea. He never did good painting on TV. And let me repeat that. And I think he probably might have been a good artist or good painter. But his TV program was not predicated on him being a good painter. It was predicated on him being a good entertainer. And he was. And I loved Bob Ross. So I'm not criticizing what he did. I enjoyed it just like everybody else. But that is not real art. That's pre. Okay, another question. Koloman Nami says, this drawing is hard. Maybe that where it's rotated on the whole composition. That may be. Yeah. David, there are many ways. And there are many ways to skin the cat. Thank you. And when I was an illustrator, for instance, when the ad agency called me up on the phone, and if they say, we need a pen and ink drawing of a Model A Ford. Is that a Ford? I don't know what it is. I don't see it. This says Columbia, South Carolina. So that's just the car club he belongs to. Anyway, they say we need as an illustrator, I would trace this. I wouldn't do everything I'm doing now. I wouldn't do this. As a professional illustrator, I would just trace the dang thing and be done with it. That's what I would do. When I have to make money and time is money and they need it tomorrow and it needs to be perfect, you just trace. That's all you do. So clearly, that's not what I'm doing now. I'm having fun, if you will, making my brain, forcing my brain to work, to do the hard work of trying to capture this image. And it is fun. Now, it's fun, sort of like jogging is fun, right? It's sort of fun, but it's hard work. I don't need to finish the whole drawing perfectly in orange, right? I've still got 3 or 4 layers to go yet. Each one, and you hear me say this a lot when I'm painting, one of the chief mistakes that beginners make is they put down a line, they put down a stroke when they're trying to draw or paint something, and then they, so to speak, die on that hill. They say, no, that line is right. I'm not going to change it. Whereas a good artist will say, I think this line might go here, but I'm willing to second guess, third guess, fourth guess, and make changes as I go along. Okay, now I'm going to sit back for a second. There, I want you to see me sit back. This is me sitting back. And again, compare big shapes. No. I'm glad I did that. Something's not quite right. And it is this part of the car sticks out too far compared to this part. So what is wrong? Well, first of all, I think I'm going to move the top part, the compartment, the passenger compartment, forward a little bit. That's better. So I'm looking at relationship between this line and this unit right here. Let me zoom back in so you can see me a little bit better. Okay, so this versus this. See, now I'm closer. It was too far away. Again, for those of you who are not drawers, especially, how does it feel to be a good drawer? The answer is you're always looking for ratios, looking for relationships, looking for this compared to that and that compared to this. Does that make sense? Zamrite says, is there a medium I can't stand? No. If there is, I usually try to force myself to learn to like it. Yeah, when you're doing, each one has its strengths and limits. When you're doing graphite, you have to take steps not to get all kinds of smudging. You're exactly correct. So you have to do something to make the smudging either work for you or else not smudge. One of the things I do typically, you see this often if you watch me when I'm drawing, I'm not doing it today, but I'll wear a glove that I've cut these 4 fingers off, left this one on. That's to protect. Here's a glove uncut, right? So I'll do that often to cut down on smudging just a little bit, especially if I'm doing charcoal. Okay, let me look again. Okay, clearly I'm ready to put down my orange pencil and pick up the next darker one, which is red. Let me look at ratios I haven't. Oh, see, here's a big mistake. Here's a big mistake. Look at how much room there is between the top of the fender and this black line. Can you see that? How much space there is? And look at my drawing. Oh, darn. Okay, so once again, how does it feel to be an artist? You just heard it. Oh, darn. So which one of these marks is wrong? One is this fender line is too high, so now I'm moving it down. And now I'm using a red pencil, which is darker than the orange, so it'll make the orange, so to speak, disappear. Now, I also think that this line is a little low, so I'm going to raise that up. Now, I'm looking at this shape right here. I presume that's the hood, half the hood, and compare it to my shape and say, how's it looking? Do you hear that? Oh, this line is wrong right here. I need to change that angle a little bit. Change that angle a little bit. Extend this a little bit. Okay, so very often, by the way, when you think your mistake is one thing, it's actually something completely different than what you think. So you can't just confidently fix something and say, there, that's it, I fixed it, because you might have instead fixed the wrong thing. That happens, in portraiture, it happens all the time. Oh, Zamorite, yes, I intentionally blend with in graphite, yes. I have a whole section on my website, dannelsonart.com, of I combine graphite and charcoal. You can see some of my graphite work there. I think I was late in my art career before I really understood. Let me grab my kit. Let me grab one of my graphite kits just for a second. Before I really understood why, if you buy a graphite kit, why do they have all these pencils? So here's my kit right here. Okay, it's a mixture of, but that's all the way from a, I believe, an 11H to a 7B, I think. Okay, so very, 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 very hard to very, 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 very soft, and everyone in between. And it was only when I started trying to do very fine, excellent graphite work that I discovered the value of these. Now, there's a guy on YouTube. He calls himself the 5 pencil method. You can find it just by that. He says out of all these, you only need 5, and he sort of says that's the secret to being a good drawer. Well, that makes me laugh a little bit, but he's found a niche, and he's telling people you only need 5 pencils. Well, the best graphite artists in the world would disagree with him. Of course, he's not aiming at the best. He's just aiming at students. And anyway, he's a very good drawer. But it's a funny approach to say the 5 pencil method. If you use these 5 pencils, you'll be a good drawer like me, which makes me laugh a little bit. But he's a nice guy, and I like him. That's a good question, David Mercer. Am I going to take a break during the holidays? I hope not. In fact, it just turns out that my grandchildren and their parents left today for a week and a half. That was sort of a surprise trip on their part. So, no, I actually may have more time on my hands, more freedom to broadcast than I do normally. So I hope to keep going. Okay, so what I would like to convey is that you're always looking at different ratios. And most of the time, you're going, oh, rats. Oh, rucka, schmucka, fucka. I'm trying not to say any bad words. Most of the time, you're castigating yourself because you just screwed up again. That's what I want you non-artists to know, and you beginning painters to know, or artists to know. How does it feel to be a good drawer? The answer is, most of the time, like a failure. Because you keep messing up, and then you keep refining and refining and refining. Oh, and when you're finally all done, oh, you know what? Sure, there might still be some imperfections in there, but you know what? None of them matter. I'm already close enough on this illustration that if I finished this out as a finished watercolor painting, probably, and I say I say this often when I'm teaching painting. What are you not going to do? What you are not going to do is hang your painting on the wall and then hang the photograph next to it and ask people to give you a grade. Am I right? That is not what you're going to do. You are not. You're going to hang this on the wall and people are going to look at it. And I'm probably already close enough here that nobody would look at it and say, maybe a Model A expert, but probably not even that. Okay, but I want to get closer. There are some, I can see that there's something wrong with my drawing. I'm just not sure what it is yet. Oh, that's what it feels like to be a good drawer. How does it feel to be a good drawer? Here's how it feels. Well, I'm close, but I can see there's something not quite right. Okay, that's how it feels, ladies and gentlemen. And while I am doing this, what you see me doing here, while I am doing this, my brain is getting bigger. Again, of course, I don't mean literally. I'm using an analogical language, right? My brain is getting bigger because I'm working hard, and the practice I'm doing here will help me draw everything better. If my next assignment is to draw the Empire State Building, let's say the Chrysler Building, just for fun, in New York City, the work that I did here, the mental work that I did here, will transfer over to helping me draw the Chrysler Building a little more accurately. Now, once again, if I'm an illustrator and I'm working for the man, I don't do any of this. I get a photograph, I project it, I trace it, I grid it, I do something. This is not what an illustrator typically does. And all such cheating is perfectly legal, especially if you're making making a living as an artist. It's perfectly legal, but you have to remember that when you're cheating, your brain is shrinking. So that should give you pause. And I was quite dismayed many, many years ago when I started making the transition from illustration, a life of an illustrator to the life of a fine artist. I was quite dismayed to discover that I think my skills had gone downhill after 30 years of cheating. And boy, that put the fear in me. So ever since then, as a fine artist, I usually, not always, but I usually try to do things the hard way, because I will like the idea of my brain getting bigger. Don't like the idea of my brain getting smaller. And then again, I'm using analogical language. I'm not being literal, of course. Can I stop saying that now? I just think it's a hilarious word picture. Your brain getting smaller. Okay, boy, there's still a few things that I'm not happy with. Like I'm cheating down here a little bit. Okay, but I've done about as much cheating as I can with that color. Let me go one step further, one step darker, just partly so that you can see how it feels. And I'm going to go to purple. I'm not sure this is a dark enough purple. Let's see what color this is. Indigo. Yeah, okay, I'm going to go to blue. Let me point something out. Oh, I just realized I should have pointed something else out. If I really wanted to be serious about getting an accurate rendering, I should have done this from the get-go. That is, I should have pointed the lap board at my face. This is why it's called the lap board, and this is what it's good for. This is the world's cheapest easel. So now, instead of looking at my paper at an oblique angle, the paper is pointed directly at my nose. So let me proceed then. And by the way, when you hold it this way, you can't hold the pencil this in the control grip. That makes sense? So generally speaking, it's a good idea. I'm sorry, I modeled very poorly for you so far this afternoon. Generally speaking, it's a good idea to start out a drawing this way and then graduate for the details to this kind of grip. All right. I'm going to eliminate. Can you see where I'm working now? I think you can still, even though I'm casting a bad shadow for you guys. Sorry about that. Oh, that's okay. This bumper needs to come way down here. Do I have the angle right? I don't think I do. There we go. That's about where the bumper is. That will solve a lot of problems. Okay, so once again, I hope that you're hearing in my voice, in my tone of voice, in my process, you're hearing how does it feel to be a real artist, a gifted drawer, a hardworking drawer. The answer is, I think I'm getting closer. Okay, I think that's right. That's how it feels. Do you hear that? Do you hear that pensiveness in my voice? That's how it feels. It's like, Okay, now you could ask me, well, are there some people that are much better drawers than you? Well, of course there are. Of course there are. Are there some people that are so good that they don't go through this second guessing, correcting mistakes at all? And I don't know the answer. My guess is only people that would fit the description of idiot savants. And I say that with great respect. I'm trying to speak technically here. Like there's this one guy, I've seen him on YouTube a couple times on TV or something, a young man and he is an idiot savant. That means he can barely talk or walk, or he can't interact socially with people. But they took him in a helicopter over New York City, and when he got back to his drawing table, he could fairly accurately reproduce every building, every brownstone, every house, every street. Pretty close. Not perfect, but very close. You can look it up yourself. So there are those among us who are truly have it. It just seems like supernatural. I don't know how else to describe it. Abilities to do things, but it comes at great, great, great cost. And again, here I'm talking about savants. Are there other people who are just better than me? Well, again, of course, there's people. Of course, I mean, no, I wouldn't be stupid enough to say there are not a lot of people better than me. But let's be realistic for a second. Like, is a Rembrandt, for instance, or Picasso in his youth, is famous for being a good draftsman when he was young. Would he be a lot better than I? And the answer is, again, I'm not. The answer is yes, of course. Of course, somebody might be, but are they so much better that they don't go through this hunt and peck, scratch, beat it up, hammer it up, step by step? And I believe the answer to that is, with the exception of perhaps the savant type person I just talked about a minute ago, the answer is no. Every artist has to hammer it out. And there are many, many, many art historians and art technicians, I don't know what you would call them, who have gone back through the annals of art history and looked at people like Michelangelo and Rembrandt and Da Vinci, and they have studied his iterative drawings. This is iterative. Start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Make correction, correct, 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 correct. See all that? That's one word for that. And it appears, as far as I remember from art history days and the little I've read in the last 30, 40 years about art history, that is in fact the case. That all artists and all good artists go through this hunting. I'd be crazy to suggest that some aren't better than I am at it. But it does, I believe it is what my struggle here is typical, not the exception. And the final thing I want to say about that, because this is what the several of the art historians are quick to point out, and I want to point out to you, I want to leave this final thought before I move on to other things, is the struggle to find the line. For instance, let me put this up here and zoom in just for a second, so I can, is that as zoomed as I can get? Hang on. There we go. Okay, let me find a good pointer here. Use a blue pencil. So let's just take the front edge of this fender, for instance. The yellow line with my first line was here. First line, second line, third line, fourth line. I can stop and start watercoloring at this point, or I can start using pen and ink. I don't know which way I'm going to go yet on this one. Okay, that's yet to be decided. But there's 4 different guesses, and the art historians are quick to point out, and I think correctly, that that struggle, in fact, imbues the artwork with a beauty that it doesn't have if you quote unquote cheat. So I talked a while ago about as an illustrator, the phone would ring on Thursday afternoon. This is what it's like to be an illustrator. And the art director would say, "Hey, Dan, been a while since we talked to you. How you doing?" Yeah, fine. "Hey, we've got this little job. We need, for a client, we need somebody to draw a red Model A. Can you do that?" And I'd say, "Sure." And I'd say, what, is this airbrush, pen and ink, watercolor?" And they say, blah, 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 blah. "Well, yeah, watercolor, I guess." I go, okay, watercolor. And model. Do you have the picture? "Yeah, we'll send the picture over for you." Okay, so they send the picture, and I don't do what you see me doing here as an illustrator. I put their picture on my printer. I print it out. I turn on my light table. I put my watercolor paper on top of the drawing, and I trace it, right? And I think most sensitive art people would argue, as I would, that even though that's efficient, oh, by the way, that, typically if I got a call Thursday afternoon, they needed this finished by noon on Friday. That is the way of the illustration. So I did, in fact, learn a lot of skills by being an illustrator. And I didn't always trace, but when you're under the gun like that, you do. So I learned a lot of other skills about color and my hand and so on and so forth. But I contend that those illustrations, they in fact do lack some kind of charm, some kind of beauty, I'm not sure what to call it, that you in fact obtain by the struggle, through the struggle. Now, somebody a minute ago said, wasn't Rembrandt also cheating sometimes? Thank you, Julian. I have a very interesting, and I think I'm correct on this. Now, this is based on David, what's his name? The guy that about 15 years ago, he rocked the art world by doing an expose almost of showing that all the great artists through history cheated, used a different camera obscura and so on and so forth. It starts with an H. David Hockney rocked the art. He was an artist himself. He rocked the art world, and he's British. Rocked the art world by saying all the great. David, thank you. The lines of the upper hood do not follow the side body well. Let me see if I can figure out where that is. Are you talking here and here? Have I fixed it? Actually, this line doesn't need to go at a slightly different angle. Thank you for that. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about or not. I think it's this line you were talking about, right? Hopefully I've corrected it. Let me look at it. Yeah. Let me go back to David Hockney saying that all the great artists through the Middle Ages used tricks. And the irony or the clincher in that is that everybody did except Rembrandt. I think that was David Hockney's conclusion. Somebody can check me on that. David Hockney, what would you look up? Great artists used camera obscura, cheated, or something like it. Some search like that would bring that. And then you might be able even to look up his statements about Rembrandt. And I believe that is the case, that Rembrandt did not cheat. And that's part of the reason, by the way, why Rembrandt is next to God in my hierarchy of good artists. That's just how good he was. He was the exception. He was the exception. As far as, and I'm taking that from David Hockney's now famous book. Okay, and David Mercer, I'm not sure that you let me know if you think I fixed what you're talking about. Now something's not right there, because the hump in the shadow. Oh no, sorry, it is right. I was misplacing it. How does it feel to be a good drawer? That's how it feels. Like, I'm not sure this is right. Oh yeah, okay, it's okay. Did you hear that? That's how it feels to be a pretty good drawer. It's like, I think that's okay. Oh, I know another example of what is not good drawing. And again, I'm not criticizing these people. The people that do the 5-minute painting, like they do Ray Charles, during the song, and they paint with two hands, and they splatter paint. Nobody knows what it is. And at the very last second, they turn the canvas upside down, and oh, it's a painting of Ray Charles or the Beatles or Abraham Lincoln or some such thing. That great entertainment, just like Bob Ross. Great entertainment. Is it great art? No, because it's pre-planned, pre-predicted, pre-practiced, pre-everything. Great entertainment. I love it. Nothing wrong with that. I wish I'd thought of it. But people do sometimes confuse what I do, being a live event painter, with what they do, and they say, "Oh, you're a what's the word they call me?" Anyway, and I say, "No. That's not what I do. I do real paintings. Like at a wedding, I do real paintings fast, but they're real paintings. They're not pre-practiced." I think I've got that, David. Thanks for your feedback. I think that's it. I did need to adjust it. This line was wrong, and I raised it up, and because that needs to be. It's not a straight line, but it's a straight, what I call a straight curve. Right? It's a contiguous line. It doesn't change direction. I'm trying to decide now. Do I take a break? No, let's just keep going. And again, I know you guys are dropping like flies. If you get tired of watching me, you just go somewhere else. People come and go constantly. That's the way it goes, of course. But for the 12 of you who happen to be watching at the moment, and often at this point, I would go to pen. Either cheap, easy pen and ink pen, felt tip pen, or a little bit higher grade would be fountain pen. One of these has brown ink in it. And you have to be very careful. If you try this, you have to make sure that your ink is truly waterproof, and you cannot trust the label. Just because it says waterproof, that doesn't mean it is. Okay? So, test your paint. By the way, this is a cheap brand of fountain pen that as you can tell, I love because I bought 4 of them. I bought a lot of water fountain pens over the years, and this is these come together. Non-shellac India black fountain pen ink. So, and actually, I don't want black. If I do this, I want to do it in brown. But today, I'm not going to do pen next. I'm actually going to do paint next. Starting with a 2-inch brush. Wait, before I do that even. Whoa, look at that. Isn't that fun? Look at that. Oh my goodness. What a mess. So again, now you can instantly see why this would not qualify as quote unquote legit style watercolor painting, because I haven't left my lights, right? If you're a real watercolor painter, which I do sometimes, but I'm leaning lately. Some of you have been following me. I've asked for your input, and many of you have said, no, I like your cheater technique just as well. I like the look of the cheater technique when it's done just as well as legit. Okay, now I am going to take, so I can still barely see all of my darkest lines. The yellow has completely disappeared. The only thing that's left of the yellow is not lines, but just a yellow glow. It's beautiful. I'm going to take a quick break right here because I got to... All right, are we back? I'm not sure if we're broadcasting or not. We'll find out here shortly. This is dry. All right, let me just a quick instruction comes to mind. I love masking fluid. Clearly, I didn't use any masking fluid here, but I could have, before I did the big washes, I could have done some. Just a word of caution, however, you have to be careful when you're using masking fluid you have to be careful about using a hair dryer, because the heat from the hair dryer often causes the masking fluid to harden beyond its normal consistency, and it becomes nearly impossible to get it off your paper. So just a word of caution. I'm not going to demonstrate masking fluid. I just want to mention that since I was using a hair dryer for a minute there while you guys. So this is dry, pretty dry. I also dry the back, of course, to try to get the moisture out of the paper. This tape is here to keep the paper from warping so much. And this is cheap watercolor paper. Okay, now there's many things I could do next. One is, again, I could come in here, but I hope you can see this. Let me see if you're zoomed in all the way. Not quite. Fascinating things happening in here. The yellow is actually acting like a mask and creating light lines. That's interesting. I don't remember seeing that before. And then all the colors just moosh together. I think that's delightful. What I'm going to do, this is fairly typical for me. I'm going to now spend the next couple of minutes lifting. And one of the tricks and the beauties of watercolor is you can lift paint. Now, I mentioned this earlier. Was it yesterday? I'm not sure. Yesterday, where I took a cheap synthetic brush and with scissors very unceremoniously whacked off the ends so that the bristles are, it's a soft, it's not a bristle brush, right? It's a synthetic hair brush, synthetic sable brush, but the bristles are a little more stiff because I made them short. So that gives me a little bit more control for doing lifting. So I'm just going to look at any area of my painting here that is somewhat light and begin lifting out color. Again, the whacked off paintbrush just gives me a little more stiffness. Now you have to do this, the purists among us, I would be driving you crazy because I'm in fact damaging or bruising the watercolor paper somewhat. So don't try this with a serious watercolorist in the room. They will begin hitting you. That's just the way serious watercolorists are. I've come to know. I'm being silly. You can buy higher quality paper that doesn't bruise quite so easily, and that's a good solution. David, appreciate the compliments. I'm afraid it's only 4 million, though, not 10 million views. So someday maybe 10 million, but right now we're just at 4. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. For those of you who are new here, truly one of the fun things about YouTube is that we develop authentic friendships with people that we've never met, right, around the world. David's one of those regulars from Quebec, Canada. I think I've asked, English is your first language, David, is that right? I think it is. And in Quebec, of course, you have to ask. It could be English or French. I think and he's not from Quebec City, if I remember, north of Quebec, which I said, first time he told me that, I said, there's nothing north of Quebec. Evidently there is. I sit corrected. And I was born in Canada. Still consider myself Canadian, even though I was naturalized. If I ever get in trouble around the world with the law, I will claim to be Canadian, not American. Everybody likes Canadians. Everybody dislikes Americans. Yes, Quebec and English, yes. I was talking to somebody last week. I forget where I was. And describing my career. Somebody didn't follow me, but they knew I was an artist. And I said to them, I want to back out just for fun, show you guys it, because it's the first time I'd ever said it, and it was like, it dawned on me. If you put me in a room painting, my joy meter is about somewhere about here. Pretty good. I'm pretty happy if you put me in a room painting. But if you put me in a room painting with a camera on me, my joy meter goes way up. No, I can't explain that. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's like, what kind of weirdo are you that you so need people watching? You got some kind of ego problem? And the answer is probably, evidently so. But that was the first time I'd ever said it that way. And I kind of, as I'm doing now, I kind of laughed at myself. That is so funny. How did that ever happen? That I'm using you guys. The truth comes out. There's no question about it. I am using you for my own ends. I'm using you to make me happy. I appreciate it very much. Okay, let's get back to the artwork here. That's enough of that silliness. It kind of popped out of my mouth, so to speak, and I was quite surprised to hear myself say it and laugh at myself, say, doggone, that is so true. I love painting, but I love painting with an audience even more. Even if the audience is just virtual on the internet. And that is the truth of it. So there you go. So I'm sure somehow I'm going to start making money at this eventually. You guys are lucky. Everything's for free right now. Speaking of which, that good. I didn't intend, but I have an announcement for you. Again, if you're one of my regulars, you've heard me moan and groan and complain and declare many times over the last year and a half or 2 years that it's coming up on 2 years now, isn't it? That I am writing a book. It's called The Breakable Laws of Painting. And it just isn't happening. I mean, I've got the whole outline done. I'm excited about it, but I just can't get around to writing it. So a very wise friend of mine led me through without meaning to, he led me through a very natural question and answer session. In fact, that's right. It was Ralph I was talking to when I did that Joy Meter thing. And he said, well, that's easy. You do your book online. You do your book live in front of the camera. And I went, duh. That was obvious. So anyway, I am going to start doing my book, and it's going to be released, at least initially, and maybe forever only, video online. And yes, you will pay for that. You will pay, but all you guys, that you're going to pay for the book anyway. So that would probably be done through Patreon. And that, again, that's The Breakable Laws of Painting that I'm very excited about, but haven't been able to do hardly any work on it for the whole last year. So I think the cosmos, so to speak, has been trying to get me to straighten out and do it the right way for me, which is like this, live online. So look forward to that. And then separate from that, there's another project I'm very excited about. And it's just a matter of getting everything, infrastructure, everything up to snuff. Quality of production, which I'm working on. Got my new Mevo camera, as you can see now. Got my good microphones, which I'm not using today, but because I can get away without no microphone up here in my sit-down studio. But I am also going to do probably Thursday night art class. It'll be every Thursday night. It will be pre-planned, carefully prescribed subject matter, very practical. And that will also be on Patreon. So at least 2 products coming up very soon that will help those of you who care about me. Both of you. My mother-in-law, who watches sometimes, and my wife, who watches sometimes. Both of you who care about me are looking for ways to support me financially for this wonderful service that I provide. I have two paying things that I expect to roll out here pretty soon, and I have some technical, I'm paying people to help me make that come to fruition. I'm just not going to rush it. When I'm all good and ready, that'll start coming out. In the meantime, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing here, either on YouTube or Facebook or both, because I've just told you that I'm happiest when I'm painting with an audience. Is that good news, Katka? I hope it is. Thank you. Thank you for that smiley face. I'm going to take that as a face of encouragement. So isn't this fun? What's happening here on this paper, though? I think this is just jolly good fun. This reminds me of principle that I've been hashing over in my mind. It became very clear to me last week, or no, 2 weeks ago, when I was painting the garden scene. Yeah, it's still there. I think there's 7 hours of me doing this large 40 by 60 garden painting. And as I was reflecting on that, I'm trying to come up with terminology, with new verbiage to describe what is good art, what is good painting. And it goes, I haven't worked it out, but you can help me. It goes something like this. Good art, and I'll say the best art. I mean, this is what I'm aiming. I'm aiming high. The best art, and here I'm just talking about visual art, and I'm just talking about two-dimensional. So the best drawing and painting, but I'm going to call it art. The best art is that which the image that is drawn, in this case a Model A, is very accurate. At least if the artist is aiming for accuracy, he or she has hit the target. Okay, so there's a time for whimsy, there's a time for twisting and cartoonishness and so on. But if the goal is representational art, let's just say that's what I'm going to do. The best art is art where the artist has in fact hit that target. The image that is being rendered is accurate. Katka from the Czech Republic. Whoa, very good, Katka. Good to have you on board. I love it. Appreciate it. Nice to hear from you. Okay, so the best art is art where the drawing is accurate. Okay, but there's a great big but coming up here in a second. Are you ready? The best drawing is the best artwork is artwork where the drawing is accurate, but you don't get any credit for the good drawing. All you can do is get discredit for bad drawing. Now, I hope you feel like that's just not fair, because that's the way I feel. That is just not fair. I do all this work to try to get accurate, and you're telling me I don't get any art credit for the accuracy, and that is correct. What do you get credit for then? Here's where it's hard to describe. I'm going to try to describe it again. Thank you. Great question there, Talon. I'll get back to you in just a minute. What do you get if you don't get credit for accurate drawing? What you do get is kicked out of the club if your drawing is not accurate. Have I made that clear? You lose points. You don't even you get eliminated from the game, the competition. You get escorted from the stadium if your drawing is inaccurate. What you get credit for is all the stuff that is not exactly literal to the object, but is nonetheless fascinating, beautiful, interesting. Okay? So if I just stopped right here at where this drawing is at this point, the drawing is, I believe, is close enough. So I don't think I'm going to get kicked out of the stadium. Now, I may tomorrow morning when I look at it with clean eyes, might go, oh my goodness, I messed up. Okay? That happens not infrequently. But at the moment, I'm fairly encouraged. I think it's probably close enough, so I'm not going to get kicked out. What is it that gives me credit? The answer is, it's many things. First of all, just the overall strange glow, if I can call it that. And hang on just a second. I'm about to use my monitor. Give me a second. This is a trick that I have to learn how to do. Let me keep talking. What I get credit for is the unusual color. There we go. Okay. What I do get credit for is the unusual color, the unusual texture, the errant, E-R-R-A-N-T, the erroneous, the wrong, the mistake lines, the yellow lines, the red ones that are, but they're interesting to look at. What I get credit for is the way the red in particular is bleeding and growing into the paper around where I put that yellow line. What I do get credit for is the way when I just lift, is the soft edges that was created by the lifting that I just did. That's just a sampling of, and I need to do a little bit more lifting. Does that make sense to you? So I haven't come up with a perfect verbiage yet, but what you get credit for as an artist is not accurate rendering. You get kicked out of the game for an inaccurate rendering. Does that make sense? It's like that's the entry level of this representational art. You have to be accurate. You have to be realistic. If you're aiming for realism, that is, okay, which I clearly am. But that's not what you get points for. What you get points for is all the other stuff, what I'll call art in quotation marks. Okay, there was a question a minute ago. Let me go back and Talon. Dan, first time catching you. Hey, man, good to have you on board. Appreciate it. What are you eager to try after the traffic-themed pieces? Oh, my goodness. What a great question, Talon. Well, I think, first of all, I'm going to continue doing, which is my my stock and trade, my standard, which is cityscapes. That's how I make most of my money. And weddings. But I will tell you, since you asked, I think I'm still most intrigued by portraiture. I am not known as a portrait painter. I did a portrait of my granddaughter just about 3 weeks ago. Little Lake, you can go back and watch me do that. You know, I've wondered many times over the last 15 years while I've been a fine artist if I might end up my career as a portrait painter. And I still do wonder that. One of the things in favor of that is that the kind of artwork I do, impressionistic paintings of landscapes, is a very crowded field, right? Everybody and their aunt does landscapes, and the field is much less crowded. Why? Because it's much harder to do portraits. So that's the other thing. But I am having a fun time doing the traffic stuff right now, and it's still ringing my bell. So I'm going to continue to do it somewhat. Now this broadcast is getting really long, but I'm having fun, and I know some of you, you're going to just leave if you have to go eat supper, or those of you in Europe, you're ready to go to bed. It's 7 o'clock here. Some of you are staying up late, right? I think you're 5 hours ahead of you. It's midnight over there in Czech Republic, if I remember right. Another comment, David. Oh, good question. Since I'm doing watercolor, how to fix when the paper starts to roll. First of all, I mentioned tape on the back helps a little bit. Secondly, this is cheap paper, 140 pound instead of 300. Third, this actually came off a watercolor block. Let me show you. Somebody might not know what that means. I know most of you do, but somebody might not know. A watercolor block is paper that it's glued all the way around. And so typically you work with the paper still on there, and it keeps it stiff and flat. And then when you're all done, you peel it off. This came off because it was actually a damaged sheet. And so I'm painting on the back of a damaged sheet. That's why it's not connected to the block. So how to avoid the curling? Number one, use 300 pound. Number two, use it on a block. Number three, you can pre-stretch your paper. I used to do this in college. Take a sheet of watercolor paper, submerge it in water for a couple of hours, then pull it out, mat it dry, and tape it very securely onto a board like this. And then give it overnight to dry, and when it dries, all the wrinkle is out of it. I used to do that. That's the cheapest way to do watercolor if you can't afford expensive paper. The fourth thing is how to get the curl out of it is use a hair dryer. Dry both sides. Do that for several minutes, and then carefully bend it by hand, which I'm doing right now. Okay, good question, David. Okay, next step is, so the last step I did was lifting out. Now I'm going to start painting, hang on, I'm trying to decide. Dark stuff or mid-tone? Dark. Uh, hang on. The mid-tone would be primarily red. And again, here's the photograph that I'm going from. Red and blue. Even though this fender is painted black, it's reflecting the sky. So it's blue, 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 blue. And I have a feeling that David Stickle, one of my heroes, would do the red and blue next and save the dark. But for some reason, that's not what I want to do. I'm going to do dark. Hey, God's guy, it's midnight. You need to go to work. Good night from the Czech Republic. Thank you, my friend. Fun to have you on board. Thank you for watching. Go to bed. Okay, here's my watercolor tray. I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I've had this particular tray since 1972. That makes me feel old. 46 years. I've had this particular. It was made by Grumbacher. Oh, and I told the story. I'm getting into trouble now. I was a very serious musician when I went to college. I started out majoring in music, and I got a one night job in the fall of 1972 where I got to play for a musical group that was coming through town, and they would just hire musicians from the local colleges to accompany them, and me and another young man got hired to play trumpet for the night, and they paid me $50. And that doesn't sound like very much now, but last time I told this story, as soon as I told that, I said, I wonder how much that's worth today. So I went online. I don't know if you're familiar with this website called Inflation Calculator, but you can put in 1972, $50, and I found out that that's equal to $300 today. And I went, doggone, that was, I was paid pretty well. My goodness, I would consider myself not terribly ill-used to be paid $300 for playing two numbers in a concert. If that happened today, I'd think, dang, that's easy money. So anyway, the reason I got into that story is because when I got this windfall of income, the thing I did, because I wanted to do something special with the money because it was unexpected and so on. So what I did is I went down to the local art store, Duma's Art Supply, for those of you in Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1972, Duma's Art Supply, and bought this watercolor kit and brushes. And now I think it's kind of funny. Because I was an art major at the time. You understand? I was an art major. But when I got some money, what did I do with it? I'm sorry. I was a music major. I'm sorry. I'm messing up the story. I was a music major, but what did I do with my money that I made from playing music? Oh, I bought art supplies. I was prophesying something to myself, and I didn't even realize it. Hey, buddy. Hey, over here. Your real future is in art, not in music. So true. I still practice, by the way. I still play trumpet. Try to practice every day. Don't succeed, but I try to practice every day. And so it's one of my serious hobbies. And I have great compassion on those of you who want to be full-time artists, but you have a day job and you just can't paint as much as you would like because it's not your living. And I know exactly how you feel because it's exactly the same way I feel about music. Of course, I'm very happy being a full-time artist, but I want to also be a full-time musician. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And but I can't. So there's many nights that my head hits the pillow and I go, oh, darn, I didn't get to practice my 30 minutes today. But rarely does my head hit the pillow that I haven't done worked on my art business, either on the business or the art, one or the other. Let me tell you a little. By the way, I was a watercolor major in college. The reason for that is very simple. Um, Acrylics were all the rage back in the day, in the early to mid '70s when I was a art major in college, and but paints were expensive. So the way I could afford to paint was by watering down my acrylics. So I started out painting in acrylics, so like everybody else, but I was so broke that I couldn't afford to buy new paint. So instead of buying new paints, I just kept thinning my acrylics down thinner and thinner and thinner. And I ended up being a watercolor major as a college student. And then I did a lot of watercolor throughout the course of my illustration career. In fact, if it was a matter of how many years, I've actually spent more years as doing watercolors than I have doing oils. But that's a little misleading because I've spent the last 15 years very aggressively pursuing my oil painting technique, so that now my oils are more mature than my watercolors. But I'm still, I think, a passable watercolor painter. And part of the reason I'm saying all that is to show you to say to you one of my idiosyncrasies. And again, I don't claim that this is a good way to paint. It's just the way I do it. I am very stuck on flat brushes in watercolors. And again, I'm not claiming that's the best way to paint. I don't know if anybody else out there is like me, but I'm very addicted to or hung up on watercolor flats, which is what you see me doing here, as opposed to rounds. I think my favorite watercolor painter is Alvaro Castanet, and I believe he uses a lot of rounds. My local friend Rick uses a lot of rounds in his painting. But for some reason, it's a control freak habit. I'm using rounds, flats, because they give me a lot of control. Which, as you know, that could be a real problem, right? In my oil painting, I rave against the control freak approach to painting. In fact, if I've made any mistake on this painting right here, right now, that is probably it. I am just painting too tight. This would be a better painting probably if I were to leave more of it unfinished. And you know what I say about that? Heck, I'm just playing. I'll get loose on the next one. Oh my goodness, Talon. It was 2 a.m. in the morning, not midnight. It was 2 a.m. Whew, that is late. Bless you, my friend. Thank you for hanging in there with me for a while. I'll try to broadcast earlier next time so you can not have to stay up so late. And David makes a good point about when you lift out. Yes. In fact, lifting out really can do all kinds of damage to your paint, to your paper, can't it? And that's a good vote for using more high quality 300-pound paper. Stands up to abuse and punishment a little bit better. But this is all right for a little sketch. So I like the flat brush, again, because of the control. I can create a very fine line just by laying down the edge of the brush flat, right? You can also use the corner of the brush. You just have to be careful when you use a flat brush, especially like in oil painting. You have to be careful. I'm using my finger to soften an edge here. You have to be careful. Don't leave a lot of marks on the painting consistent with the width of your brush, right? So flats are wonderful tools. Just be careful. Don't use them on the flat too often. Does that make sense to you? You don't, this is like roughly a 1/2 inch brush. You don't want to leave a bunch of 1/2 inch lines on your painting. That is uncomfortable to the viewer. Let's see that thin line right there. Zoom in for you guys a bit more. Now I haven't decided yet if this is going to be a pen and ink and watercolor painting or just watercolor. This is pretty typical of me though to not know the answer to that until late in the process. Many times I'll make that decision late, and I will say that most of the time when I reserve that decision for late in the process, I do in fact, yes, end up doing pen and ink on top of or along with the watercolor. And I think the reason is very much the way I like using pencils in oil paintings. I like the way the pen and ink scratchy lines behave, juxtapose up to the paint lines. But then again, there's something beautiful about just a painting that only has paint on it, not pen and ink. So I don't know yet. I'm still up in the air as to whether I'm going to. By the way, so what colors I'm using, I've been doing a whole bunch of things. Right at the moment, I'm using a dioxazine purple and some kind of dark green. I don't know what it is. And of course, those two combined create virtual black, which is what I'm after down here in these dark shadows. I was using blue and brown, Payne's gray, and various browns to create my black color. So I'm kind of going all over the palette to create this dark stuff. And I am certainly not down into the tiny details yet. The next thing I'll do after this will be red and blue. Thank you. Smooth groove color. I slip back to my old self and I don't do two hands. Isn't that funny? Maybe I should start. I'm losing my identity, right? If I don't use two hands. Good observation. I've thought that before, but forgot all about it. Never said anything about it. Isn't that funny? Yeah, when I do watercolors, I sort of slip back into my old persona, which was not at all ambidextrous. I've mentioned that before. I only started the two-handed thing about 12 years ago as an oil painter, and don't even worry about it when it comes to watercolor. Huh. But you catch me with an inconsistency, because if I'm better with two hands at oils, then I really ought to be better at two hands in watercolor, shouldn't I? Oh boy, now you put pressure on me. I love it. Thanks for pointing that out, Mr. Smooth Groove. A little texture in the tire there. So one thing I want to do before and Kalamani says yeah, where's that dual action? Gone out the window, guys. Gone out the window. Kalamani mentions that he liked the cross hatch, the scribble hatching in the drawing that I did last night. Thank you for that encouragement, and I may do that here. Remains to be seen. Before I go to red, and I am, by the way, going to take I'm going to call it quits here pretty soon. I'm not going to finish completely. I'm still fighting a cold here, and I started broadcasting at the peak of my energy today, and if I overdo it too much, I'll pay for it tomorrow. So this has been great fun. Like I said, my joy meter has been very high. Those of you who missed the earlier, it turns out I'm just using all you guys for my own enjoyment, because I enjoy having company when I'm painting, when I'm doing artwork. But I better quit before I get too worn down, as I said, or I'll pay for it tomorrow. Okay, just a little bit then. I'll start the red. I used a big brush to do that shadow. Now let's go back to medium small brush. Let's do some red just before we pack it up here, okay? And I don't know what color red this is. It's watercolor red. Where to start? My guess is that I'm going to do a first layer of red that will represent the light colored red in the photograph, like that. Just basically coloring in the lines, all the stuff I rail against as an oil painter, right? And then I'll come back and hit the red again for the darker tint. So see this is very light and this is dark, and this is light and this is dark. That's what I'm talking about there. Generally speaking, with watercolor, you build up, you achieve your intense values, your dark values, by building up layer and layer and layer, usually. So I think in that regard, I'm being a fairly traditional watercolor painter in that regard right now. And I make no pretense here of being a purist or being a real watercolor painter, because I plan to come back with opaque media, either gouache or even a correction pen like I used last night. Usually on my more refined watercolor sketches, like tonight's watercolor sketch is quite a bit more finished than the one I did last night. The one I did last night, I used the correction pen. For this today, I will probably use gouache for my light highlight. So it'll be a little bit more of a legit style, or traditional, if you will, watercolor painting, not using the correction pen. But I love that correction pen, and it really is a neat trick, I think, for capturing white highlights with interesting texture. Since we're still here, since you're still here, I'm going to mix up a alizarin crimson then, and my next layer of darker red will be something like that. Does that make sense? Okay. But I feel my energy draining. I'm going to call it quits, and probably maybe not even. I might finish this painting tomorrow on camera rather than finish it without you. Looking for a little purple, little violet in here to make this even darker. This is so much fun. By the way, I am one of the purposes for me working in watercolor yesterday and today is my watercolor technique has definitely lagged behind in the last 15 years. Without apology, I'm not apologizing for that. But I do still offer my services, like as a wedding painter, to do watercolor paintings for people, and I want my watercolor technique to catch up a little bit to my oil painting technique, so that I can offer the alternative with a clear conscience and not feel like they're getting a second class product. By the way, what I do recommend is if anybody hires me to do a wedding painting, if they're having me do one painting, I recommend always that they hire me to do an oil painting. But fairly frequently, people will hire me to do two paintings, in which case I recommend that the second of those two paintings be watercolor. So again, part of what I want to do here is get my watercolor technique up to snuff, if you will. Get it up to speed so that I feel more confident. And again, I've decided that in that case, it's not going to be a legit watercolor technique. It's going to be my strength, which is this watercolor sketch technique, what I call it. Yes, and that means I need to start using two hands, don't I? Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm going to do just one more thing before we leave. I had a really nice highlight on this fender, and here I've painted over it in blue on purpose, hoping that blue was not a staining color, and indeed it was not. So I'm going to just lift that out, and then I'll call it a day. Lefty loosey, that's right. Oh, what is a correction pen? Thank you. It's this. It's an office supply product, right? For correcting type. Let me show you yesterday's sketch where I used this correction pen to do these white lines. So all the light stuff, all the artificial light stuff is correction pen. And it leaves, and you can also smudge it with your finger. It doesn't all have to be very intense. But it's a shortcut, and it's good for real quick sketches. But I think probably for this painting today, I will probably use gouache. And I think David has made a good observation. He says this style of illustration, the way I'm painting right now, really does look like an illustration. And David, I'm afraid you are exactly correct. It does have the feeling of an illustration. And what does that mean? Generally speaking, it means a little too tight, a little too, is that right? A little too finished. There's not enough artsy stuff happening. It's a little too literal. Now, again, if I'm doing like a wedding painting for somebody for money, I'd rather err on the side of literal. I want it to be real because I certainly don't want to get kicked out of the game by having a bad drawing. But having said that, I think you're exactly correct. I think you've hit the nail on the head, which is where I need to go in my watercolor painting, and that is I need to move toward a more artsy style, more which basically I think for me means mostly don't finish so much. And we'll see. I'm going to still try to pull this painting out and make it look a little bit more fine artsy, a little bit less illustrative by the time we're done. And that might be with pen and ink and not finishing the whole thing so much. Like if I do pen and ink, just do it in this area, not worry about this, and so on and so forth. Well, I ramble now. Bless you. Thanks, you guys. It's been great fun. appreciate your company very much. And I'm going to go rest now a little while and come. I do look forward to finishing. It's nice to stop a piece of artwork when you're excited about coming back to it. And that's where you've got me. This has been so fun. I appreciate it. Let your friends know about me if you like what I do. If you don't like what I do, keep that to yourself. That'll just be our little secret, okay?